Good day, and welcome to this roundtable discussion hosted by Canqate in observance of Quality Month 2021. I am Shane McQuilkin, Technical Administrator of the Grenada Medical and Dental Council, Accreditation Secretariat, and your moderator for today's session. Here with us today are some esteemed colleagues who live and breathe quality in higher education on a daily basis. They have all agreed to present their decades of experiences and insights on the issue of how accreditation has facilitated the sustainability of higher education. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome our team this morning, comprising Mr. Curtis Floyd, President of Canqate and the Acting Executive Director of the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago, ACTT, Dr. Lisa Henlin, Accreditation Officer of the University Council of Jamaica, Dr. Deborah Jack, the Executive Director of the National Accreditation Council of Guyana, and Mrs. Lisa Gale, Executive Director of the Barbados Accreditation Council. Welcome, everyone. Today, our methodology would see each panelist presenting their perspective on how accreditation has facilitated the sustainability of higher education. After we've listened to all of them, we will loop back to have a more focused discussion on a couple of issues. So without much further ado, I'd like to invite Mr. Curtis Floyd to begin his presentation on how accreditation has facilitated the sustainability of higher education. Mr. Floyd.
Good morning, colleagues. And I will be not so much doing a presentation, but more or less having a discussion or presenting my viewpoint on the topic here, how accreditation has facilitated the sustainability of higher education. I think that we first have to look at what is accreditation, and accreditation could be both a status as well as a process. And as a status, it is bestowed upon institution that has met educational quality standards set by a bona fide accrediting agency or quality assurance body. And as a process, it is the steps that an institution undergoes to attain this status. Now, accreditation is really a quality assurance process that is used to evaluate and assure the quality of the educational offerings at an institution, and it is also designed to foster public confidence in an educational institution. We all know from being engaged in accreditation that there are benefits to be derived not only by the students themselves, but also the institutions that are being evaluated, as well as employers who will be employing the graduates of these institutions. And of course, they also redound to the benefit of the country. Now, we also need to look at what is sustainable education. And sustainable education, of course, there will be different definitions, but one in particular that I like is finding long-lasting solutions through education and looking at developing the social, environmental, and economic issues, which are the three pillars of sustainability. Now, linking the accreditation to sustainability, I think that with regard to ACTT and Chapter 3906, which is the act that governs ACTT, there are specific areas identified that for ACTT would be engaged in to ensure sustainability of education. Some of these would be speaking to the establishment of ACTT to raise the quality of the sector, and that is the post-secondary and tertiary education sector. to disseminate good practices by research, to provide advancement of education and training, to ensure that quality in institution meets the standards, and to protect the interest of students and stakeholders. Therefore, sustainability through education, I think, or through accreditation, is achieved through the introduction of standards that institutions must satisfy and uphold in order to demonstrate that they are of internationally acceptable quality, as well as implementation of robust monitoring mechanisms to ensure continuous improvement at these institutions. The monitoring may include measures such as having the institution submit monitoring reports, having the institution subjected to periodic visits by the quality assurance body, and also by the quality assurance body providing support to the institutions in the form of institutional development. And this could include workshops, making sure that the institutions are exposed to webinars, conferences, training opportunities by professionals in different fields, the sharing of best practices, and of course, providing access to resources to the institutions. All of this would help with developing the institutions and guiding them towards assuring sustainable education. There are also other areas such as outreach opportunities that the institutions can engage in, and these again can be facilitated at an institution to institution level, or it is something that can be introduced by the quality assurance body to facilitate outreach and opportunities. Also, focused research in different areas, looking at assessment and curriculum reform. All of these are areas or opportunities for the institutions to be able to engage in sustainable education. We also have the opportunity to look at policies and policy reform, looking at resources. And when we speak of resources, we are looking at the provision of financial, human, physical, and technological resources, all which work together as a well-oiled machine to result in sustainable tertiary education. And these are some of the things that we have been engaged in over the years at the Accreditation Council. And we have seen the benefits in terms of the improved quality at the institutions. The institutions themselves have also reported that their exposure to these different opportunities have benefited them immensely. And they too have seen the improvement in the quality of their offerings, the improvement in the quality of their facilities, the improvement in the quality of the students that graduate from their institutions, and of course, even feedback from employers would indicate that they are seeing a closing now of the gaps that they would have identified previously in some of the graduates from these institutions who are now employees at their facilities. So these are just some of the areas that I wanted to share this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Floyd, for putting the whole topic into perspective with your thorough breakdown of both accreditation and sustainability. My takeaway is that accreditation is both a process and a status, and it brings with it numerous benefits to diverse stakeholders. Issues such as training, outreach, focused research, resource assessment are assured through the monitoring of the accreditation agency, and that leads now to enhanced and continuous quality improvement at the institutional level. Thank you for that. We now move over to Dr. Henlin, Accreditation Officer at the UCJ. Dr. Henlin.
Thank you so very much for inviting me to be a part of this forum. And I want to thank my colleague Curtis for setting the context and the foundation. Very, very good context indeed, as he has shared some of the processes and activities that we all engage in as external quality assurance agencies. I want to start by basically looking at the functions of the UCJ over the past 34 years, and to indicate that since our existence from 1987, we have been mandated to oversee the development and maintenance of a robust higher education quality assurance system. And of course, accreditation has been central to that function, to that mandate. Like our colleagues at ACCT, the preparation of standards play a critical role. The preparation and use of standards play a critical role in the quality assurance of programs of institutions. And over the years, the UCJ has developed a range of standards, a variety of standards, discipline-specific standards, generic standards, distance education standards, and standards which are aligned to the various external quality assurance processes, which are used by the institutions as well as the evaluation team that conducts the review. And throughout the years, we have seen that accreditation has provided access to a variety of higher education institutions and programs. Through accreditation, through the UCJ's accreditation process, the public, students, employers have benefited from the accreditation process. In fact, accreditation has been designed to strengthen and sustain the quality of higher education. I like to look at the higher education system as an ecosystem with various interconnected parties, of which our students, we could consider our students the most important. And one of the most important benefits to students is that they are assured that they are pursuing programs that are satisfactory, have met standards that will provide them access to a profession and even to further studies. Of course, accredited programs assist in the transfer of credits. And last but not least, accreditation also provides a pathway to accessing low interest loans and scholarships, which will benefit students. The employers have an assurance of accountability. They are assured of the quality of the program of study, and they receive an assurance that graduates have achieved certain learning outcomes, have achieved particular levels of knowledge and specific competencies. The accredited programs also serve the public in general and the government specifically. Accreditation serves to identify the institutions and programs that are on a quality journey. The identification of these programs provide us with some confidence that these institutions are striving for continuous improvement and enhancement. our institutions have benefited from the intervention called accreditation. The institution benefits by being prompted to examine itself. We like to say to look in the mirror, to self-assess, to see where it needs improvement. And so the work of the UCJ through accreditation acts as a catalyst for strengthening the internal quality assurance systems within an institution. We have already mentioned that approved institutions are able to provide students with access to low-interest Government of Jamaica student loans, and institutions also benefit from the enhanced marketability of programs. There are opportunities for collaboration with other institutions, as well as the recognition of cross-border higher education providers who operate within our jurisdiction. This is very important because accreditation actually distinguishes between those diploma mills that tend to infiltrate one's environment and will provide the public with the information that they need to make a conscious decision, to make the right decision regarding programs of study. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Henlin, for continuing the conversation. Some really, really important things there to really internalize, particularly the important role that standards play, that accreditation and so on, higher education is an ecosystem, and that accreditation really benefits or provides benefits to the public, the students, to employers in different ways. But particularly if we were to focus on the students, it gives them that assurance that accredited programs are satisfactory, and it helps to improve their employability, and of course provides access to further education. The institution itself is forced to do a self-examination and a self-assessment to really fortify its quality practices and so. So thank you very much for that, and really appreciate your presence here. We move right along and we invite Dr. Deborah Jack of the National Accreditation Council of Guyana. Dr. Jack, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I am delighted to join with the group in this discussion about the role of how accreditation has facilitated the sustainability of higher education. I'm going to take the opportunity to describe the scenario of Guyana as one of the newest accreditation bodies. We have, the National Accreditation Council was set up only in 2004, and therefore it is quite young. But in spite of that, I know that its presence is being felt now. First of all, I would like to establish the situation in which the community in Guyana was not so much aware of this thing called quality assurance. The established higher education like University of Guyana would have had their own system, but quality assurance was fairly new to Guyana, and thus one of the main things that NAC was able to do, and we are still working on, that is very important for us, is to increase the awareness of quality assurance in Guyana, not only to members of higher education or institutions, but to education stakeholders generally. We needed to let them know that this is something that is required across the world. And Guyana, as one member of the world community, has to participate in this process to ensure that our qualifications will be recognized outside of Guyana. We are still working on this whole awareness issue because there are many persons, including students, who still are not aware of the National Accreditation Council. And that is essential for us because when the stakeholders, especially parents and students, are aware of this council, then they will be able to be aware of the need to ensure that the institutions where they attend are offering quality education. And so they become an external measuring rod for these institutions themselves. Only recently we had in the newspapers a list of all the, well, we are still registering. We haven't started the whole process of accreditation as in the older agencies across the Caribbean. We have 40-something institutions that we have to bring up to the first level and then to move them up to the accreditation level. We only have one so far at the accreditation level. However, that notice that was put in the newspapers caused parents, employers, education officials to start asking questions of some institutions that they have not seen on the list. And so this additional pressure, this external pressure, is helping the institutions themselves to recognize that they have to get on board. And immediately after that happened, 2 institutions made contact with us that were supposed to have been approved by NAC before, because they were more or less embarrassed because they were not seen as one of the schools that have been approved by the National Accreditation Council. NAC's work of quality assurance and external accreditation has also helped the private education providers to have some degree of recognition because of the fact that before, persons were not so sure who was doing what and how recognized these schools were. So now that they have been quality assured by NAC, they now have the kind of recognition that will allow their qualifications to be accepted by parents, and for parents and employers and other stakeholders to be encouraged to send their students there. What has also happened is that being in the agency that is now regularizing tertiary education, we have seen an improved networking between different aspects of the community who use persons who graduate from these institutions. For example, we have the medical council, the dental council, the employers of technical school persons, and all these folks now they're talking with us. We recently had a meeting with ExxonMobil, this whole oil and gas that is so prominent now in Guyana, and they are questioning, they are trying to understand the qualifications that are being offered in Guyana. They are trying, because they are employing persons and they want to know what this one means and the other one, you know, so employers are questioning, and therefore they're coming to us, they are putting pressure on the institutions, because if those institutions are not recognized by NAC, then the employers are not willing to recognize them and therefore to employ their graduates. So in that way, we have a whole heightened awareness and more interaction between employers, between institutions, and between the agency NAC. And what has really been good for us is that this whole quality assurance and accreditation processes have greatly eliminated, to the extent where I would say we are not aware of schools that are offering tertiary education that are not doing what they're supposed to do, or the level or offering qualified programs as they should. And this is all because of the process of accreditation and registration and the presence of the National Accreditation Council as an agency. And so we have now a better recognition of our qualifications, not only in Guyana, but across the Caribbean, across the world. We have people calling from Africa, India, Russia, all over the place, where people are, and United States and so on, where they are questioning to find out the quality of education in Guyana and whether or not they can accept those qualifications coming out of Guyana. And all of this external pressure is also helping the institutions to recognize that if they want to be internationally recognized, they have to develop their programs, improve their programs, and get their systems to a level where, you know, the students can be comfortable traveling with their qualification. And last but not least, and my previous colleague did mention the whole fact that the internal qualification, quality assurance system of these institutions, they are improved as a result of the whole external QA processes that are organized and implemented by the agencies. And so in these ways, I found that quality assurance and the National Accreditation Council has helped in the institutions to improve the quality of education that they are offering, not only to us in Guyana, but students who come from outside of Guyana too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jack, for that. It really is good to know that the NAC has been working so hard at creating that public awareness, you know, so that the public can tell the benefits of quality assurance and understand what it does both on a national and international level. And I think you expounded greatly on how those benefits accrue to the Guyanese populace, but that I'm sure figures for every society. And so I also wanted to note the repetition of the fact that through higher education, through quality assurance in higher education, that we seem to be working very hard and doing well in terms of reducing the risk of students signing up for the diploma mills, the bogus institutions, and so, and just ensuring that students do access quality programs, not only in the mainstream field that we're accustomed to, but in also the non-traditional areas. And so thank you, Dr. Jack, and moving right along to Barbados and Mrs. Lisa Gale. Mrs. Gale.
Hi, good morning. It's such a pleasure to be joining this very esteemed panel. I am only 17 months in, having joined at the Barbados Accreditation Council, and to hear my colleagues, I was very pleased. You have really accurately reflected on the topic of how accreditation has facilitated the sustainability of higher education. When I think of sustainability, for me, it is a commitment to rethinking, reimagining, revisioning, even as we are going through we're now doing our 5-year strategic plan. We're now doing the very early phase of that. But yes, I see it as those 3 things: rethinking, reimagining, and revisioning, particularly our quality assurance practices. And that's how we will improve the sustainability of higher education. And it is both internal and external. And as I reflect on the theme, I think about quality assurance professionals further capitalizing on sustainable development for, you know, those steps that you take for bearing on your organizations' products. And if we look at the theme for the week, for Quality Week, it looks at sustainability, improving our products, our people, and the planet. And if we are, in fact, as quality assurance professionals looking to improve and to be sustainable, then we must indeed look at the environment that is around us, look at the people who do, whether it is our external evaluators, whether it's us, the quality assurance professionals, whether it is the team that we have here in the respective quality assurance agencies, as well as the higher education institutions, the persons that they employ, and then the services that they offer, so that the students will be the ones who are benefiting, so that the employers will be the ones who are benefiting, as well as the whole system. So we should do this cognizant of the ability that we have as quality assurance professionals in improving the overall system that we are working within. One of the things I just came from, we just started an external evaluation with an entity. They're now starting a 2-day virtual visit. And one of the things I talked about just before was the strength and the rigor that we go through when we are doing an exercise like this. And I was very pleased to hear about the whole contingent's experience and knowledge and what that would bring to bear in terms of the same exercise. It will continue to maintain the robustness and the integrity of that exercise, the evaluation process. So I wanted to use two terms. I wanted to steal 2 terms from somewhere. And I've heard this before, build back better. When you think about sustainability, sometimes we think of a hurricane and we think of the damage that it has done, and we think about building back better, and we can practically see that within the context. But then when we think of how COVID has impacted higher education, and we know of the online scenarios, the emergency training, we know of normal online with respect to the EMSs, etc. Building back better for me then is constructing a robust system, and I have a definition here. Constructing a robust system which is financially and environmentally sustainable, being cognizant of the focus on sustainable quality assurance, so that we are not limiting it to quality assurance, World Quality Week, as we're discussing within this context, but we should be dedicated to it, and we should be dedicated to quality constantly, as it must be reflecting in our everyday aspects of lives. And I say that because building back better is something that we want to do in our schools, we want to do it in our institutions, because we know who it will benefit. And if we're looking at the theme again, we pull quality out. And I keep having to do this to a lot of my friends and family who are not in the quality space. They don't necessarily understand quality as such an esoteric topic. So I tell them, as individuals, we do quality assessments every day. Sometimes we look at the quality of our work, we look at the quality of our relationships, the quality of our food, and the quality of life generally. And we are the ones who make those assessments. But in quality, in education, the quality assurance professionals, they're also trained to base on the standards, whether it is through registration or through accreditation. They're the ones who are also determining whether something is of a quality standard. They make quality assessments on a regular, and that's how I get them to understand that these are things that are happening on an everyday basis. So here at the Barbados Accreditation Council, through our act, we are seeking to ensure that providers meet global standards to prepare students for the world stage. And we use the benchmark of global recognition as a quality indicator in order so that we can compare ourselves with other persons through best practices. And if you listen to my 3 colleagues who came before me, they talked about the various ways they have quality assured in the institutions. And through that, I can boldly join them and say that accreditation has indeed benefited higher education, whether it is the employers, whether it is the students, whether it is the institutions, and I dare say the whole socioeconomic system, because when we have persons who are learned, they make better decisions, they can be employed, then therefore they can add value to the overall society. So there's value in quality assurance. Some people don't see the connections, but I'm putting my economics hat as a learned economist, and I'm making sure that I put the connections, and I can tell you that it has added value to Barbados. Even we have seen 17 years of the existence of the Barbados Accreditation Council, similar to the NAC in Guyana. We've only been around a short time, but we have seen here in Barbados that there's value in accreditation, there's value in quality assurance processes, there's value in being sustainable. And even as we move towards the building out the national qualifications framework, we are seeing that that is another step to even further augmenting the system, making the system a little more robust, making the system a little more inclusive, and ensuring that all persons, whether they're at the level of access or they're at the level of doctorate, but all persons can participate in this space. So all I can say is that we are hoping and continuing to adapt to the new normal. We are trying to maintain the standards set pre-pandemic for ourselves as an organization and for the sector that we serve, guided by that mindset that disruption will only bring forth smooth adaptation when there's a firm foundation. That would be my contribution.
Thank you, Mrs. Gale. And the first thing that struck me after you said 7 months is that you certainly don't speak like a rookie at all. So thank you for that.
17 months, sorry.
17 months, okay. And I like the organic breakdown that you gave on quality. You know, sometimes for those who work in quality in higher education, it's taken for granted that, you know about all the mechanisms and everything, but the everyday person wonders what it is exactly. So I like the organic breakdown that we make quality choices every day in the food we eat, the transportation that we use, all of these things. I also particularly like the fact that what you said in terms of accreditation, forcing the institution in a sense to rethink, to reimagine, to revisit their processes and so. And also that it is incumbent on everyone, both in the quality assurance industry and those outside of it, to know that quality assurance deals with a certain level of robustness and integrity. That is crucial. The caveat at the end of all of this, the takeaway from everybody is indeed, I like how you phrased it, that accreditation has definitely benefited all stakeholders in the higher education ecosystem, all of them, and has added value to the system from the employer side, from the student side, from the parent side. And so thank you very much. I think you brought a very sweet closure to this first session, but also glad that you mentioned COVID, because I think that gives us a lovely way to segue right into a couple of questions that I want to throw out to all of the panelists here this morning. The first one is how exactly has COVID-19 impacted this sustainability in higher education that we've just deliberated and discussed? How has COVID-19 impacted sustainability in higher education? Can I lead off and ask Mr. Floyd to respond to that?
Thank you, Shane. Of course, we would have linked education to facilitating the 3 pillars of sustainability, which would be impacting, of course, the environment and economic and the social aspect of our lives. With regard to ACTT, back in August of 2020, we would have conducted a survey of our institutions, registered and accredited institutions. We would have looked actually targeting 38 institutions, 38 registered institutions, and 14 accredited institutions. We would have had a response rate of about 77%. And what we were looking at in this particular survey would have been 3 main areas: the general changes in enrollment and revenues at these institutions, the changes in teaching and learning, and the changes in the planning process. And just to share very quickly, with regard to the changes in enrollment, of course, a lot of institutions would have suffered a reduction in their enrollment because of the COVID. One of the contributing factors would have been we in Trinidad and Tobago would have had to go on a lockdown because of the COVID situation. And institutions and public services and whatnot were closed for a particular period of time. And because of this closure, of course, a lot of the institutions were not able to operate and engage in their traditional face-to-face teaching. We found that because of that, a lot of them would have had to resort to emergency remote teaching. And it's not common, I think, or peculiar to Trinidad and Tobago. I think from hearing from a lot of the other Caribbean territories, they would have had to engage in the same measures, emergency remote teaching, going and pivoting from the face-to-face to the online mode of teaching. There would have also been changes in the planning processes at the institutions. So because the future was so uncertain, institutions traditionally would have engaged in like 3 to 5 year strategic plans. But because of this peculiar situation being encountered and the future being so uncertain, they had to resort now to 3 to 12-month periods of planning to see how they can remain, on the surface and not sink as a result of what they were experiencing because of the COVID. So we had institutions who, of course, because of reduced enrollment, they would have had reduced income. The institutions had to lay off staff. Some of them had to cut salaries of staff. Some of them had to close some of their sites. There are 1 or 2 institutions who actually ended up having to close their doors. They have not been in operation since then. And there were instances where institutions would have reported that they would have actually lost staff due to COVID. Yeah. So some of them, key persons in the institutions, like the quality assurance person, or even in terms of some managers. And this, of course, would have caused a lot of emotional trauma to some of these institutions. So, of course, all of this would have culminated in institutions not being able to provide the level and quality of service that they were accustomed to. Yeah. So the survey itself was very, very revealing, and we at the council, of course, would have had to take a lot of this into consideration in how we were dealing now with the institutions, how we're moving forward with engaging with the institutions and helping them to, in terms of their business continuity. I don't want to take away too much now from the others, but I just wanted to lay that on the table, and probably the others can share their experiences as well.
Thank you, Mr. Floyd. Anybody else wants to chime in? How has COVID impacted sustainability in Barbados, in Guyana, in Jamaica? Dr. Henlin, am I putting you on the spot?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I just wanted to share that the first case of COVID-19 was announced on March 10 in 2020, which happened right in the middle of our quality assurance in higher education week, our workshop for our assessors, to be followed by the second day, which was the workshop for the institutions. And I recall that we were on tenterhooks wondering, how that, this was just the very first case of COVID-19. And we were wondering how that would impact the attendance. But lo and behold, the room was full and we had maximum turnout. And for that, we're grateful because, of course, we were just getting into the whole issue of COVID, not knowing what was ahead of us. By the following month, though, in April, we realized that COVID was very, very serious and was here for a while, quite a while. And there was a concern about business continuity within our institutions. And we issued what we called a business continuity quality criteria checklist to our institutions in April of 2020. And we asked them to identify some of the challenges that they were experiencing and how they were going to address and support staff and students during this time. So we in a sense, upped the monitoring of our institutions during that time. And since last year until now, there are still one or two institutions who have not yet submitted their business continuity, but to the best of our knowledge, all our institutions are still up and running and doing well. We were impacted, of course, with the lockdowns and forced into, I should say, transitioned into working remotely more fully, as we were actually on a path prior to COVID. So in a sense, prior to COVID, the accreditation unit actually were working on a rostered basis from home. And so when COVID hit, we were able to transition into working from home fully with the requisite policies in place and directives from the government. We had what I would describe as a successful pivot to virtual visits. We had our first virtual visit in April of 2020, and we have been continuing with that up to this present time, supported by, again, Zoom protocols, working through the Zoom video conferencing platform, and doing our training of our evaluation teams using Zoom. Again, I just want to reflect on the fact that we had, in fact, started the online dimension of training of teams prior to COVID in the early days using Skype, and then transitioning to Zoom. So we had all of that. So in all of this, I am thinking of, yes, we pivoted. We are kind of like the bamboo, the bamboo will bend, but we didn't break under the COVID, and we were able to this year continue with our quality assurance week. We had a training session for our institutions under the theme of assuring quality in online delivery for higher education. So we demonstrated some resilience. I just want to conclude my comments though by focusing on some questions that I think we as a quality assurance agency need to think about, and I would extend that to all of us as well, in terms of, to ask ourselves, what exactly did the pandemic reveal? What did it show up? What are some of the shortcomings that we're seeing, in ourselves and in the system, in that ecosystem, as I like to think of it. And the other question, coming off the fact that of the recent climate change conference and so on, and the fact that the environment is at the forefront of our mind, is, are we using our resources, the resources at our disposal, as fully as we possibly can? I think of the fact that now we have transitioned to using Google Drive completely for the submission of our documentation to support the external quality assurance review, whereas years before we used to have the institutions coming in with boxes of documents, which we would then dispatch to the evaluation team members and so on. So, the reduction in paper is a major plus for us. And the last question I want to raise is, can we do things differently, but yet still maintain a quality focus? So for me, those are some critical questions as we continue to go through the pandemic that we need to reflect on. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Henlin, for your thoughts. Very thought-provoking and necessary questions to ask ourselves. Dr. Jack, anything to add here?
Yes, I would like to support those comments made by Mr. Floyd and Dr. Henlin too, because we have had the same kind of adjustments that needed to be made as a result of the COVID. But one thing that came out, that stood out for us, that had to be accelerated, was the preparation for online and distance education. As I indicated earlier, NEC is still quite young, and so we are growing in a lot of areas. And that was an area that we had identified for growth as an agency, for us to be able to develop standards and so on to quality assure online programs. And then the pandemic arrived and sent everybody in that tailspin. And then we recognized that we have to hurry up this process, because
I think we lost Dr. Jack for a bit. Let's see if we get her back. If not, then I'll just ask. Yes, I think we lost her. So
are you hearing me?
Yeah, we're hearing you now again. Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was saying that the pandemic just caused us to now had to accelerate our training for both staff and institutions to allow us to be ready for quality assuring online and distance education. And that was the greatest impact. And therefore, I'm happy for that. But we're not quite there yet. But we'll get there shortly, I hope, because we got help from the Commonwealth of Learning to have the criteria and standards established. And then we got help for the training for our officers and for the institutions. And therefore, we are hoping that early next year, we can start this whole online quality assuring online and distance education. The other thing that what I think the pandemic has done is help us all to utilize the technology a little more. And it has helped us to, because NEC has a very small staff. We only have.
We can't hear you again. Sorry, Dr. Jack, but we can't hear you. There seems to be some issues here with Dr. Jack's internet connection.
And I think that was good for us. And because of I would like to stop there for now.
Dr. Jack, I don't know if you wanted to
Hello?
repeat. I'm not sure if you wanted to repeat your last. Okay, so she has a delayed connection.
I think you have lost me, or I have lost you.
You were about to tell us how many staff members you had, and then you went here.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing anybody.
Okay. I will continue in the intro.
Yeah, go ahead.
But similar echoing of the type of challenges faced with COVID, I actually want to steal some of the ideas from Dr. Henlin in terms of maintaining the training and upping the monitoring, because we have not done much of that in the latter stage of 2020 and early 2021. We did start to do the virtual assessments. But one thing I've noticed though is the reduction in costs for the providers based on the normal costs associated with the evaluation visits, whether you have persons coming from overseas, etc. And they have noted that even as we were negotiating the virtual visits for one of the current provider who's now having a review, they mentioned the reduction in price. And I think that's a benefit for the provider, not necessarily for the quality assurance agency per se. And I also wanted to underscore the point about using the technology. Dr. Jack just mentioned it. They're being forced to use the technology so as to make business, make the process of business even easier on ourselves and also on the persons who we interact with. So I think those are two positives that came out, and not necessarily as impactful as ACTT would have had in terms of the loss of some providers, but some of them have asked for a delay in the re-registration process, but not necessarily that they've gone out of business per se. We haven't had that significant impact on our providers. And that's it for me.
Yeah, I really want to just say thanks to everyone for the wealth of information that's coming out here. And I really hope that our viewership is as enthralled as I am with the content. And so I just have one final question to the panelists. I mean, as the world waits to exhale, we can say, from this dreaded COVID-19 pandemic. Life must go on and life must continue, and we really do hope that COVID buries itself somewhere permanently soon. But we've heard about improvements in technology, the use of technology. We've heard of that reduction, and I laughed when Dr. Henlin mentioned it, because you did actually literally have boxes of information coming in to give to your site visitors and so for assessment. But how do you imagine the future in higher education post-COVID? What stays, what goes, what development would come? What kind of future do you imagine after COVID? What do you think that would look like? Since you're on screen, Mrs. Gale, let me just start with you. Thanks. You're muted.
Yes, sorry. I was saying that's quite okay. I jotted down some thoughts here in terms of what the future of higher education post-COVID will look like. And I think we better learn the lessons from COVID and not see COVID as a blip and then continue to go back to normalcy. I think we need to draw the positives out of this experience. And even as we look at virtual visits, we can do a blended approach. And so I think that's what the future will look like for us for sure here at the Barbados Accreditation Council. One of the other things in terms of the whole evolution of EQA, one thing I want to take away from this, which we haven't done a lot, I've only had 1 or 2 conversations with Mr. Floyd, had a conversation with UCJ as well. I did some trying to speak to all of the persons, but I want there to be some further integration in terms of coming together, using ideas, drawing on the best practices, etc. And that for me is what the future for us here at the BAC would be. I know it happened in the past, it isn't COVID related, but using the stories and the lessons learned from our colleagues in our jurisdictions within the region so that we can help ourselves along, because some of us were honestly left with no answers, don't know what to do next, etc. And we needed to really evolve in that regard. Those will be 2. I also have here in terms of the use of data, we must underscore the value of how we should be using data when it comes in, how to maintain that data and not have, I think Dr. Henlin mentioned it in terms of the boxes, but even not just the information in terms of the preparation for the site visits, but how do we keep information on each of our providers? We have in Barbados, we have a lot of files, and in order to find something, you have to go back through various volumes, but being a lot more nimble, a lot less bureaucratic, using more alternative providers as well, trying to not limit ourselves to the little spaces that we have. I think those will be the few that I have jotted down. And also in terms of focusing on the assessment of even the graduates in terms of the types of learning, as well as employability. So those are things that I have as what the future of EQA would be for us here at the BAC.
Thank you again, Mrs. Gale, very much for your insights. Mr. Floyd?
As we started with Ms. Gale,
you thought I would go.
Leave me for last. But not a problem at all. You know, I endorse what was said by Ms. Gale in terms of course, the virtual visits, because we are engaged, we at ACTT are engaged in a barrage of visits right now, a backlog of visits that could not have taken place because of the closure of institutions, etc. So we are constantly engaging in virtual visits at this time, as well as the online submissions. We too have reduced the need, you know, or eliminated the need for institutions to be submitting their applications physically. So everything is done online. All the services have moved totally online now. And that is something that is very much welcomed by all, you know, even in terms of storage space for all these physical files, you know, there is no longer a need for that. the online delivery of the curriculum. So I am seeing very many of the institutions from our engagement with them, from the surveys that I would have mentioned earlier. They too have welcomed, while there might be some challenges they would have encountered, they too have welcomed this whole transition now to the online. And they have indicated that they see the benefits that have been derived from transitioning now to the online delivery of the curriculum, in terms of no longer having to be paying rent for all these multiple sites that they have. The traveling back and forth now is reduced. They are now able to, because their curriculum is now online, they are now able to reach a wider audience, etc. So you see some of the institutions are increasing their reach to outside of the country. One of the things that I'm seeing now, because institutions have been adapting to, and there are some of them who were able to quickly make the change to the online delivery, this is going to foster now greater competition among the institutions in terms of them offering a wider range of programs, trying to reach a wider volume of persons, and of course offering greater incentives for persons to pursue programs at their particular institution. I'm seeing institutions having to become more innovative with greater focus on the quality of their offerings. Because of the competition now, they have to up their game. So there would be greater focus on quality. I'm seeing institutions offering a wider range of programs at more competitive prices. I'm also seeing instances where institutions, there might be an amalgamation of institutions, or institutions engaging in partnerships, so that they can better capitalize on the resources and the combined resources that each of them may have. I'm also looking at it from the EQAA's perspective. I think that as EQAs, we would have to be a lot more stringent with regard to the monitoring of the institutions and their offerings. Of course, because now that everything is online, it opens itself up to a lot of other things that may come into play. And I think that as EQAs, we would have to be a lot more stringent in monitoring the institutions. So there would be impact for, or implications for the ACTT in terms of us modifying our policies, continuously monitoring the programs, and of course regulating programs and courses, because one of the things that has come out of this whole COVID situation is that because of the finances, persons are more inclined now to pursue short courses rather than long-term programs for 3 and 4 year duration because of the whole financial situation. So as EQAs, we have to be cognizant of that, make sure that we have all the policies and processes in place, and ensure that we provide incentives for the institutions to be innovative in what they are offering, and to at the same time maintain the quality in what they are offering to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Floyd. And I want to just hand it back over now to Dr. Jack in Guyana. Dr. Jack, you're going to tell us a bit of your imagination on the future of higher education after the COVID pandemic. But I think we were all intrigued by you telling us how small the staff was, but we lost you there. So maybe if you could just begin by giving us that number, the size of the staff, and then you tell us about the future and what it would look like post-COVID. Thanks, Dr. Jack.
Yes, we only have 7 officers, including the executive director. So you can imagine that we are struggling with the workload, and I'm begging for staff, but I'll get there, or we'll get there at one point or the other. I was saying that for us, the use of the technology has been very helpful. And I think going forward, that's something that we should do some more. Using the blended approach in site visits. Sometimes We need to just send a small team or, just one person while the others are online so that they could check for something in there. But I think that's the biggest thing that going forward that we intend to do, because using the technology with a staff, like such a small staff, will definitely help us and cut down on costs a lot. The other thing is, going forward, we have to be able to get some of our evaluators to use the technology. They don't want to read online. And some of these are not so old persons, they say, oh, it's affecting my eyes. It's too much reading. I need hard copies where I could scratch and write on. And so that's a big push that we are trying to do, to get our evaluators to move beyond the printed copy, and also to get rid of we have this storage problem, the point that was made to store all these documents. And so we're trying to build an MIS system that will allow us the kind of flexibility to find information, even if, Guyana is big and we have to go out of town. And if you're out of town, sometimes you have to conduct meeting while we are out of town. And if we're able to access these electronic files, then it's easier to do those kinds of meetings. And so I think that's the way we have to go. Even as we have already started doing this, we have to go there more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Jack. And I just want to round off the discussion with Dr. Henlin from the UCJ. Higher education post-COVID.
Thank you very much. I underscore some of the thoughts shared by my colleagues here this morning. And just to pick up at the point where reference was made to storage and how difficult it is to find a particular file mentioned just now by Lisa Gale of BAC, and to share with everyone, our viewers and so on, that we are at the point where in fact we have been piloting our integrated quality assurance management system for the past year or so, and hope to see implementation in 2022. And that will in fact significantly reduce the use of hard copies papers for all stakeholders. We're talking about institutions, we're talking about the evaluation team, the quality assurance staff, to an extent, the supporting units within the UCJ, the accounts or record management information staff, and so on. So for us, I would say the future is here. The future is here. We're actually moving towards that at the end of this year and into 2022. Just to note that in terms of the visits, I think a fulsome discussion needs to be had within the UCJ and of course with representative stakeholders, external stakeholders. But it seems as if hybrid in terms of visits is a possibility. I want to mention too that there were one or two cases, some specific programs during this period, during the pandemic, where we did have staff members and a team member actually go out to sites, because you do have those practical areas that still need to be eyeballed, and the verification is very important. So I want to share that in addition, automation, I think, is the way to go, and using the cloud, using the technology, as well in terms of teaching and learning. There seems to be the need to be more student focused, more learner centered. The learner has become more central in this ecosystem. The UCJ has received ISO 9001 2015 certification, and one of the tenets of that is that the customer is literally king. We need to delight the customer while it's maintaining standards and quality. And so I think the learner is going to become more important, even as my colleague from ACTT mentioned the short courses. UCJ had developed guidelines for the accreditation of short courses many years ago. The uptake was not what we had hoped at the time, but now it seems to be reintroduced as short courses seem to be coming back at us under a more attractive, more appealing name of micro-credentials, you know, in various shapes and forms. So I think we are at the point where we are revisiting and reviewing those standards, preparing standards for reviewing micro-credentials. So the future is here, and I think we just need to prepare ourselves as external quality assurance agencies to embrace new forms of quality assurance as well, even as new products, new ways of delivering programs and courses will come to us. So thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you. And what resonates from all the presentations on the future is that we definitely not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but the positives that COVID-19 has sort of made us adapt. Some of it has to stay, better data management, the increased and improved use of technology, and even the type of product that the students try to access now in terms of that prevalence of micro-credentials or short courses that some students seem to access now for various reasons. So the future doesn't look as bleak as COVID-19 may cause it to look on the surface. And we do have that resilience as a people, I think, to survive this. So thank you to everyone. As we close, I just want to say that it has been truly a pleasure moderating this session today. I would like to thank what I would say the luminaries on the panel for expressing those profound thoughts and refreshing perspectives. Quality in higher education, and in all education, in fact, must be the primary focus for both educators and regulators alike. A deliberate, concerted effort towards continuous quality improvement will ensure that quality adapts and adjusts accordingly to the dynamism of higher education. On behalf of Canqate, let me again express my gratitude to each one of you who's presented here today, and to everyone who has viewed this. I do hope that you feel as enlightened and empowered as I do, as we continue to advocate and agitate for quality in higher education. Once again, I say thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you, colleagues.
All right. Thank you.